A kingdom can survive a false queen for a while, but it can never outrun the truth. The silver crown gleamed beneath 1,000 candles as Alpha King Lucian Blackwood lifted it high above the crowd. The grand hall of Blackwood Castle shimmered with gold banners, crystal chandeliers, and rows of nobles dressed in their finest silks. Every seat was filled. Every eye watched the throne. Every voice waited for the same moment. Lucian's expression remained calm, though exhaustion lingered behind his silver eyes. Years of ruling had taught him how to hide doubt beneath confidence. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, a new beginning, a stronger future for the kingdom. Beside him stood Vivian Thornridge, radiant in a white gown embroidered with silver moonflowers. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders. A practiced smile rested on her lips as she gazed toward the cheering crowd. The kingdom adored her, or at least they believed they did. By the authority of the Moon Throne, the royal herald announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. His Majesty Alpha King Lucian Blackwood hereby crowns Vivian Thornridge as Luna of the Northern Kingdom. Thunderous applause erupted. Noble families rose from their seats. Musicians struck their instruments. The celebration began before the crown even touched her head. Yet far beneath the castle, beyond marble staircases and hidden corridors, beyond locked iron doors forgotten by most of the kingdom, silence lived. A single lantern flickered against cold stone walls. Its weak glow barely reached the corners of a small underground cell. There sat a woman wrapped in a faded gray blanket. Her name was Evelyn Ashford. Once, her laughter had filled palace gardens. Once, servants had bowed when she passed. Once, she had stood beside the king beneath moonlit skies. Now nobody spoke her name. Nobody visited. Nobody remembered. At least that was what the kingdom believed. Evelyn slowly lifted her gaze toward the distant ceiling. Faint vibrations drifted through the stone above. Music, cheers, celebration. She closed her eyes. She already knew what was happening. The coronation. After 3 years, the day had finally come. Vivian would receive everything. The title, the throne, the future that once belonged to someone else. A weak smile touched Evelyn's lips. Strangely, it did not hurt as much as it once had. Pain changes over time. At first it burns. Later it fades into something quieter, something heavier, like carrying a winter storm inside your chest. Above, Lucian lowered the silver crown onto Vivian's head. The crowd erupted once more. "Long live the Luna," voices shouted. "Long live the Luna." Hundreds of wolves repeated the words until they became a roar. Vivian bowed gracefully. Lucian offered his hand. Together they stepped toward the balcony overlooking the capital city. Thousands of citizens filled the streets below. Lanterns illuminated every rooftop. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders. Families waved silver banners bearing the royal crest. It should have felt like victory. Instead, a strange sensation settled over Lucian's chest. Small at first, barely noticeable. He paused. The feeling vanished, then returned. A distant ache, familiar somehow. His hand instinctively moved toward his heart. "Your Majesty?" Vivian asked softly. Lucian blinked. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. For a brief moment, he thought he heard a voice. Not with his ears. Somewhere deeper. Like an old memory calling from far away. A memory he could never quite reach. Meanwhile, beneath nearly 200 feet of stone, Evelyn opened her eyes. Her fingers brushed a small symbol carved into the wall beside her bed. A moon surrounded by vines. She had carved it herself during her first year underground. A reminder that darkness never lasts forever. The lantern flickered. The air suddenly felt different. Evelyn frowned. For the first time in years, warmth spread through her wrist. Soft, gentle, almost alive. She stared down at the faint silver glow appearing beneath her skin. Above the castle, fireworks painted the night sky. The kingdom celebrated the rise of a new Luna. Deep below, hidden beneath chains of silence and forgotten lies, something ancient had just awakened. Most of the kingdom believed the woman beneath the castle was a traitor. The few who remembered her name spoke it only in whispers. Evelyn Ashford. Once honored, once admired, now forgotten. The lantern burned low as dawn approached. Pale light never reached this part of the castle. Time moved differently underground. Days blurred together. Seasons passed without color. Yet something felt different this morning. Evelyn stared at the faint silver glow beneath her wrist. It pulsed softly beneath her skin like a heartbeat she had not felt in years. She touched it carefully. The warmth spread through her fingers. Then it vanished. Silence returned. For a moment she wondered if she had imagined it. Hope could be dangerous. Hope could make prison walls feel smaller than they were. Above her, castle servants rushed through polished hallways preparing for the first official day of the new Luna. Fresh flowers decorated every corridor. Musicians filled the courtyards with cheerful melodies. Noble guests lingered after the coronation, eager to gain favor with Vivian Thornridge. Vivian enjoyed every second of it. Standing before a mirror framed in silver vines, she adjusted the crown resting upon her golden hair. The jewels caught the morning light beautifully. Her reflection smiled back at her. Perfect, powerful, untouchable. A servant approached carefully. Your Grace, the council meeting begins in 30 minutes. Vivian nodded. Tell them I will arrive shortly. The servant bowed and left. Once the door closed, the smile disappeared. Vivian's eyes drifted toward the crown. 3 years. 3 years of carefully crafted lies. 3 years of controlling every story told within these walls. 3 years of making certain Evelyn remained forgotten. Yet for reasons she could not explain, unease had followed her since the coronation. The feeling lingered now like a shadow she could not shake. Meanwhile, Alpha King Lucien Blackwood stood alone on a balcony overlooking the capital. Morning fog rolled between rooftops. Merchants opened shops. Children chased one another through narrow streets. The kingdom appeared peaceful, stable, everything a ruler should want. So why did something feel wrong? Lucien gripped the stone railing. Sleep had not come easily. Strange dreams had followed him through the night. A woman standing beneath moonlight. Dark hair moving in the wind. Gentle eyes filled with warmth. He could never see her face clearly. Every time he stepped closer, the dream faded. Every time he reached for her, he woke. Frustration settled inside him. Still thinking about the dreams? A voice asked. Lucien turned. His oldest advisor, Theodore Graves, approached slowly. Gray hair framed a thoughtful face. Theodore had served the royal family for nearly 40 years. Few people spoke honestly to the king anymore. Theodore still did. You have looked troubled for months, Theodore continued. Perhaps even longer. Lucien exhaled quietly. Do you ever feel as if you have forgotten something important? Theodore studied him carefully. Everyone forgets things. Not like this. Lucien looked toward the city again. This feels different. Theodore remained silent. Sometimes wisdom meant knowing when not to speak. Far below the castle, another person carried secrets. Clara Bennett balanced a tray of food as she descended a narrow staircase hidden behind the servant quarters. She moved cautiously. Few people knew this passage existed. Fewer still knew where it led. Clara was only 22, young compared to most palace staff. Yet she remembered things others had chosen to forget. She remembered a kind woman who once spent afternoons helping injured animals in the royal gardens. She remembered a future queen who knew every servant by name. She remembered Evelyn. Reaching the final door, Clara unlocked it quietly. The hinges creaked as it opened. Evelyn looked up from her bed. Surprise flickered across her face. You came back. Clara smiled gently. I said I would. The older woman returned a faint smile. Small, tired, genuine. Clara placed the tray on a wooden table. Fresh bread, warm tea, an apple. Better than usual. You should not risk this, Evelyn said softly. If someone discovers you, let them discover me. Clara sat down across from her. I am tired of pretending I do not remember who you are. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Somewhere deep within the castle, a clock struck the hour. Evelyn lowered her eyes. The kingdom moved on a long time ago. Clara shook her head. Not everyone has. Neither woman noticed the silver glow beginning to return beneath Evelyn's wrist. This time it stayed a little longer. This time it was brighter. And somewhere high above them, in the king's private chambers, an identical glow appeared beneath Lucien Blackwood's skin. Dreams followed Lucien again that night. Not ordinary dreams. These felt like memories trapped behind a locked door. He stood alone in a field covered in silver wildflowers. Moonlight washed across the landscape. A woman laughed somewhere ahead of him. The sound was warm, familiar. It stirred something deep inside his chest. He tried to reach her, tried to call her name, but a thick fog rolled between them. The moment he stepped forward, the world shattered into darkness. Lucien woke with a sharp breath. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of his chamber. His heart pounded faster than it should have. For several seconds he remained still, staring at the ceiling. Then he looked down at his wrist. The faint silver glow remained. Not bright. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Yet it was there. Real. Lucien rubbed the mark with his thumb. The strange warmth returned. He frowned. Wolf bonds were ancient. Powerful. Every child in the kingdom grew up hearing stories about them. Yet his bond had been silent for years. Completely silent. Until now. Elsewhere in the castle, Vivian sat at the head of a long council table. Advisors discussed trade routes, harvest reports, border negotiations. She listened with polite attention, though irritation simmered beneath her composed expression. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Several times she caught nobles whispering when they thought she was not looking. Not disrespectful whispers. Curious ones. Something had changed since the coronation. She could feel it. Lord Benedict Harper cleared his throat. Your Grace, there is one final matter. Vivian looked up. Proceed. The elderly noble unfolded a parchment. The Temple of the Moon requests permission to present the Sacred Moon Oath during next month's harvest gathering. The room grew quiet. Vivian's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. The Sacred Moon Oath. One of the oldest traditions in the kingdom. Few ceremonies carried more significance. According to legend, the oath recognized truth between ruler and Luna. Most considered it symbolic now. Ancient superstition wrapped in royal tradition. Yet hearing the words sent unease through her stomach. That custom has not been performed in decades, Vivian replied. Traditions exist for a reason, Lord Benedict answered carefully. The people find comfort in them. Vivian forced a smile. I will consider it. The meeting continued, but her focus never returned. Hours later, Clara Bennet made her way through the castle gardens carrying fresh linens. The air smelled of roses and early spring rain. Birds sang from nearby trees. The world above felt impossibly different from the world below. She paused beside a marble fountain. Someone stood there. Theodore Graves. The king's advisor watched the flowing water with distant eyes. Clara lowered her gaze respectfully. Lord Theodore. Miss Bennet. His voice remained gentle. You seem troubled. Clara hesitated. Theodore had always been kind. Wise. Yet kindness could be dangerous in a place built on secrets. I am fine, sir. Theodore studied her for a moment. You remind me of someone. Clara looked up. Who? A sad smile touched his face. A woman who once believed every life deserved compassion. Something tightened inside Clara's chest. Theodore turned away before she could answer. Be careful, child. The truth has a habit of returning when people least expect it. Then he walked away. Clara remained frozen beside the fountain. Did he know? Had he guessed where she disappeared every evening? Her thoughts followed her all the way back underground. When she entered the hidden cell later that night, she found Evelyn sitting beside the wall. The silver glow beneath her wrist had grown stronger. No longer faint. No longer easy to ignore. Clara stopped in surprise. Evelyn. Evelyn looked down. I know. What is happening? The older woman slowly shook her head. I am not sure. Yet deep inside, she suspected the answer. Ancient bonds could sleep. They could be buried beneath grief. Hidden beneath lies. Forgotten beneath years of silence. But they could never truly disappear. Above them, in a chamber lined with moonstone carvings, Lucien stared at the identical glow on his own wrist. A cold realization settled over him. This was not random. This was not illness. Somewhere in the kingdom, something connected to him had awakened. And for the first time in 3 years, the Alpha King found himself wondering whether the greatest mistake of his life had not happened in the future. Perhaps it had already happened long ago. The feeling refused to leave him. For 3 days, Lucien carried it everywhere. During council meetings, during royal ceremonies, during quiet moments when he stood alone staring across the kingdom he had sworn to protect. Something invisible tugged at him. Not painful, not frightening, just persistent, like a distant voice calling through a storm. On the 4th morning, he found himself standing inside the royal archives. Dust floated through beams of sunlight. Ancient shelves stretched nearly 30 feet high, packed with records that spanned centuries. The old librarian blinked in surprise when the king appeared without an escort. Your Majesty. Lucien nodded politely. I need information about wolf bonds. The librarian hesitated. That is a broad subject. Then start with unusual cases. Several hours passed. Scroll after scroll covered the table before him. Most contained familiar stories. Mates finding one another. Bonds strengthening over time. Ancient Luna traditions. Yet one passage caught his attention. A faded journal written nearly 300 years earlier described a bond that had vanished for years before unexpectedly reawakening. Lucien leaned closer. The bond returns when truth hidden from the heart can no longer remain hidden. He read the sentence twice. Then a third time. His jaw tightened. Truth hidden from the heart. The words lingered long after he left the archives. Meanwhile, Vivian's frustration continued to grow. Servants seemed distracted. Advisors appeared cautious. Even Lucien had become distant. Not openly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But she noticed. Every glance. Every hesitation. Every moment his thoughts wandered. Somewhere she could not follow. Standing before her mirror that evening, she removed a jeweled earring and studied her reflection. "What are you hiding?" she whispered. Her own eyes offered no answer. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter." A servant stepped inside. "Your Grace, Lord Theodore requests an audience tomorrow morning." Vivian frowned slightly. Theodore rarely requested anything directly. Very well. Once the servant left, unease settled deeper into her chest. Down below, Clara carried another tray through the hidden passage. The farther she walked, the more nervous she felt. The glow beneath Evelyn's wrist had become impossible to ignore. Each day it remained longer. Each day it seemed stronger. When she entered the cell, she found Evelyn standing near the wall instead of resting. That alone was unusual. For years exhaustion had weighed heavily upon her. Tonight she looked different. Not stronger exactly. More awake. More present. "You should sit," Clara said. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I spent 3 years sitting." Clara laughed despite herself. The sound felt strange in this place. Almost forbidden. She placed the tray down. "The glow is brighter." Evelyn glanced toward her wrist. Silver light shimmered beneath her skin. Soft as moonlight reflecting on water. "I know. What does it mean?" Evelyn remained quiet for several seconds. Memories drifted through her mind. Moonlit gardens. Laughter. Promises spoken beneath ancient oak trees. A silver-eyed king who once looked at her as though she were the center of his world. "Long ago," she said softly, "someone told me that true bonds never disappear. They only wait." Clara listened carefully. "Do you believe that?" Evelyn looked away. "I do not know what I believe anymore." Yet even as she spoke, something warm stirred inside her chest. Hope. Small. Fragile. Dangerous. Above them, Lucien sat alone in his private study. Rain tapped gently against the windows. A fire crackled nearby. Normally the sound calmed him. Tonight it did not. His eyes drifted toward his wrist once again. The silver glow pulsed steadily beneath his skin. Then suddenly a vision flashed through his mind. So fast he almost missed it. A woman standing in sunlight. Dark hair. Gentle eyes. Her smile carried a warmth that stole his breath. Lucien shot to his feet. The image vanished instantly, gone before he could grasp it. Yet one detail remained. Not her face. Not her voice. Her name. Evelyn. The word echoed through his thoughts like a forgotten melody. Lucien stared into the fire. His pulse quickened. He had not spoken that name in 3 years. He had barely allowed himself to think it. Yet now it felt impossible to ignore. Somewhere beneath the castle, Evelyn suddenly pressed a hand against her chest. The same warmth had reached her. For one brief moment, she felt as if someone had remembered her. And for the first time since the darkness began, neither of them slept peacefully that night. The name refused to leave him. Evelyn. Lucien repeated it silently as he walked through the castle the following morning. Every hallway seemed different now. Every familiar room carried an uncomfortable weight. 3 years earlier, he had convinced himself that chapter of his life was over. Necessary. Final. Yet the bond awakening beneath his skin seemed determined to challenge everything he believed. Outside his office, royal guards stepped aside as he approached. Theodore Graves waited inside, standing beside a table covered with maps and reports. The older advisor immediately noticed the tension in the king's expression. "You look as though you have not slept." Lucien closed the door behind him. "I remembered something." Theodore raised an eyebrow. "Only something?" Lucien hesitated. "A name." For the first time in many years, Theodore's calm expression shifted. Barely. Yet Lucien saw it. "Whose name?" Theodore asked quietly. "Evelyn Ashford." Silence filled the room. The fire crackled softly nearby. Theodore looked away for a moment before returning his gaze to the king. That is not a name many people speak anymore. Why? Lucien asked. Theodore seemed surprised by the question. You know why? Perhaps I thought I did. The older man's eyes narrowed slightly. What are you really asking? Lucien moved toward the window. Rain clouds drifted across the horizon. 3 years ago, everyone told me the evidence was undeniable. Every witness agreed. Every report pointed to the same conclusion. Theodore remained silent. Yet lately, Lucien continued, I cannot stop wondering whether I ever questioned any of it. The room felt colder after those words. Theodore folded his hands behind his back. Sometimes certainty is more dangerous than doubt. Lucien turned toward him. Did you believe she was guilty? Theodore did not answer immediately. The hesitation itself felt like an answer. Meanwhile, preparations for the upcoming harvest gathering continued throughout the capital. Merchants decorated storefronts with silver ribbons. Musicians rehearsed in crowded squares. The sacred moon oath had become the city's favorite topic. Citizens debated its meaning in taverns and marketplaces. Most viewed it as harmless tradition. Others believed the old magic still carried power. Vivian disliked every conversation surrounding it. Standing in the royal garden, she watched workers hang lanterns between flowering trees. The celebration was still weeks away, yet anxiety tightened around her thoughts. She had spent years controlling the kingdom's narrative. Suddenly events felt unpredictable. A young servant approached carefully. Your Grace, a package arrived from the Western Archives. Vivian frowned. From the archives? Yes, Your Grace. The servant handed her a small wooden box. Once alone, Vivian opened it. Inside rested a single silver necklace. Her expression instantly changed. She recognized it. The necklace had belonged to Evelyn. Vivian's pulse quickened. Attached to it was a note. Found among unfiled evidence from the Ashford investigation. Please advise regarding proper storage. For several seconds, she simply stared. How had this resurfaced now? Why had someone reopened old records? She quickly closed the box. The unease she had been ignoring suddenly felt much more real. Deep beneath the castle, Clara entered the hidden chamber carrying fresh candles. She stopped when she saw Evelyn standing near the small window slit, carved high into the stone wall. It offered almost no view, only a narrow strip of sky. Yet today's sunlight streamed through it. Golden. Warm. Evelyn closed her eyes and tilted her face toward the light. Clara smiled softly. You look different. Evelyn laughed quietly. That is impossible. No. You do. Clara stepped closer. You look like someone who remembers who she is. The words settled heavily between them. Evelyn opened her eyes. For years she had survived by forgetting. Forgetting dreams. Forgetting hopes. Forgetting the woman she used to be. But lately memories returned more easily. The gardens. The moonlit walks. The promises. Most of all, Lucien's face before everything fell apart. Suddenly the silver glow beneath her wrist brightened. Stronger than ever before. Clara gasped. At that exact moment, 200 feet above them, Lucien felt a sharp warmth spread across his own wrist. He froze in the middle of a corridor. His breath caught. The sensation lasted only seconds. Yet something came with it. Not a dream. Not a vision. A feeling. Loneliness. Patience. Quiet strength. Emotions that did not belong to him. Lucien stared at the glowing mark beneath his skin. Somewhere nearby, impossibly close despite years of distance, another heartbeat seemed to answer his own. And for the first time, the Alpha King began to suspect that the person he had lost was not lost at all. The following morning began with a discovery that should never have happened. Deep within the royal archives, an elderly records keeper named Harold Pierce stood on a ladder nearly 12 feet above the floor, searching through shelves that had not been touched in years. Dust coated every ledger. Forgotten histories slept in silence. He reached for a loose folder tucked behind a row of tax records and frowned. It did not belong there. Curious, he opened it. Inside were documents from the Ashford investigation. Harold recognized the name immediately. Everyone did. Yet as he flipped through the pages, confusion crept across his face. Several witness statements were missing official seals. Dates did not match. One signature appeared to have been added weeks after the report had supposedly been completed. By lunchtime, the folder sat on Theodore Graves' desk. Theodore read every page twice. His expression grew darker with each document. Nothing proved innocence. Not yet. But for the first time, questions outweighed answers. Across the castle, Lucien felt the same restless pull that had followed him for days. He abandoned 3 meetings before noon. Concentration slipped through his fingers like water. Every attempt to focus led him back to the same thought. Evelyn. Why now? Why after 3 years? He stood beside a tall window overlooking the eastern courtyard when Theodore finally arrived carrying the folder. Your Majesty. Lucien immediately noticed the concern in the older man's eyes. What happened? Theodore placed the documents on the table. I found something you should see. The king opened the folder. Silence settled between them as he read. Minutes passed. These records were approved by the council, Lucien said carefully. Yes. Then how are there discrepancies? Theodore folded his arms. That is exactly the question. Lucien continued reading. Small details. Tiny inconsistencies. Alone they meant little. Together they formed an uncomfortable pattern. The certainty he had trusted for years suddenly felt less solid. Who handled the original investigation? He asked quietly. Theodore's answer came immediately. Several people. But one name appears more often than the others. Lucien already knew who he was about to hear. Vivian Thornridge. Far below the castle, Evelyn sat with Clara near the small lantern. For the first time in years, conversation came easily. They spoke about ordinary things. Spring flowers. The city. Stories from the marketplace. Moments that reminded Evelyn the world still existed beyond stone walls. Then the silver glow returned. Brighter than ever. Clara stared openly now. There was no hiding it. Soft light flowed beneath Evelyn's skin like moonlight trapped beneath glass. It keeps growing stronger, Clara whispered. Evelyn nodded slowly. I know. A strange feeling settled over her. Not fear. Not exactly hope. Recognition. Something long asleep was waking. Somewhere nearby, connected by a bond neither fully understood. Suddenly Evelyn lifted her head. Her heartbeat quickened. For one brief second, she felt another presence. Distant. Familiar. Searching. The sensation vanished almost instantly, yet it left her breathless. Above them, Lucien experienced the same thing. He stepped away from the table. The warmth beneath his wrist surged. His pulse echoed against his ribs. Then a memory appeared with startling clarity. Not a dream this time. A real memory. Evelyn kneeling in the palace garden beside a wounded bird. Sunlight in her dark hair. A smile bright enough to make him forget every royal responsibility waiting inside the castle. Lucien closed his eyes. He had not remembered that day in years. When he opened them again, one truth stood impossible to ignore. If the bond was awakening, then someone had lied. Bonds like this did not return without reason. Theodore watched the realization spread across the king's face. What are you going to do? Lucien looked toward the castle floor beneath his feet, toward levels most nobles never visited, toward forgotten places hidden in shadow. I am going to find the truth. Neither man noticed the figure standing outside the partially open door. Vivian remained perfectly still as she listened. The color drained from her face. For the first time since placing the crown upon her head, genuine fear entered her heart. Vivian did not sleep that night. Every creak of the castle sounded like a warning. Every passing servant seemed to know something she did not. Standing beside the window of her private chamber, she watched moonlight spill across the courtyard below. For years she had controlled the story. For years she had believed the past was buried deep enough to remain forgotten. Now cracks were appearing everywhere. Across the castle, Lucien sat alone in his study long after midnight. The folder remained open before him. Witness statements, reports, missing seals, contradictions, details he should have noticed years ago, details he should have questioned. A ruler was supposed to protect the truth, yet somehow he had accepted someone else's version of it. The realization left a bitter weight in his chest. Near dawn, he rose from his chair. He could not wait any longer. The pull inside him had become impossible to ignore. Theodore arrived moments later, summoned before sunrise. The older advisor studied the king's expression and immediately understood something had changed. You have made a decision, Theodore said. Lucien nodded. I want access to every restricted level beneath the castle. Theodore remained silent for a moment. Then he reached inside his coat and removed an old iron key. I hoped you would ask. Lucien looked at the key. You knew? I knew there were questions that deserved answers. The king accepted the key. Neither man spoke again. Some truths required silence before they could be faced. Far below, Evelyn sat awake beside the lantern. She had not slept either. The bond had been growing stronger for days. Now it felt almost alive. Warmth flowed through her wrist. Occasionally, she could sense emotions that were not her own. Restlessness, regret, determination. The connection frightened her because part of her recognized it immediately. Clara noticed the distant look in her eyes. "What are you thinking about?" Evelyn smiled sadly. "About how strange life is." Clara tilted her head. "Strange. 3 years ago I spent every day wishing someone would remember me." Her gaze drifted toward the narrow strip of morning light above. "Now I am not sure I am ready if they do." Before Clara could answer, a faint sound echoed through the corridor outside. Footsteps. Not one person. Several. Unusual. Visitors never came here. Clara stood quickly. Concern flashed across her face. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. Then stopped. Silence followed. Evelyn felt her heartbeat quicken. Something was different. Somewhere above them, hidden doors were opening for the first time in years. Stone corridors stretched beneath the castle like forgotten veins. Lucien moved through them carrying a lantern. Theodore followed several steps behind. Dust coated the walls. The air felt colder with every turn. Few kings had walked these passages. Few even knew they existed. Yet the farther Lucien traveled, the stronger the bond became. The silver glow beneath his wrist brightened until it illuminated his hand. Theodore noticed. "It is guiding you." Lucien did not answer. Deep down, he knew the advisor was right. Another turn. Another staircase. Then a long corridor appeared ahead. At the far end stood a single wooden door reinforced with iron bands. Lucien stopped walking. His breath caught. The warmth in his chest surged so strongly that it almost hurt. Not pain. Recognition. The kind that reached beyond memory. Beyond logic. Beyond time itself. On the other side of that door, Evelyn suddenly pressed a trembling hand against her heart. Tears filled her eyes before she understood why. For 3 years, she had survived by convincing herself that the story was over. Yet now every instinct whispered the same impossible truth. Someone was coming. Someone who finally remembered. Outside the door, Lucien stared at the iron handle. His hand slowly reached forward. Then he froze. Fear. Real fear. Not of what he might find. Of what it would mean if the bond was telling the truth. Because if Evelyn was behind that door, then the greatest mistake of his life was waiting on the other side with her. Lucien's hand remained on the iron handle for what felt like an eternity. Every instinct urged him to open the door. Every fear begged him to walk away. The silver glow beneath his wrist burned brighter than ever before. There was no denying it now. Whatever waited beyond this door was connected to him. Deeply, irrevocably. He finally turned the handle. The hinges groaned softly as the door opened inward. A small lantern illuminated the chamber beyond. Stone walls. Simple furnishings. Silence. Then he saw her. Evelyn stood near the center of the room. For a moment, neither of them moved. 3 years disappeared into a single heartbeat. Lucien had imagined this meeting countless times without realizing it. In every version she was angry, broken, accusing. Yet the woman before him simply stared. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders. Her face looked thinner than he remembered. Older somehow. Not because of age. Because of sorrow. The silver light beneath her wrist mirrored his own. Theodore stopped several feet behind the king. Even he seemed unable to speak. Clara stood frozen near the wall, tears already filling her eyes. Lucien felt the bond surge between them. Not imagined. Not symbolic. Real. The connection pulsed like a living thing. Every doubt shattered at once. "Evelyn," he whispered. Her name left his lips with the weight of a confession. Evelyn lowered her eyes briefly. The sound of her name in his voice stirred memories she had fought to bury. Long walks through the palace gardens. Quiet conversations beneath moonlit skies. Promises made by two people who once believed the future belonged to them. When she looked back up, sadness rested where anger should have been. Somehow that hurt more. Lucien took a step forward. "I thought," his voice failed him. He tried again. "I believed the reports. The witnesses. Everything I was shown." Evelyn listened quietly. "I know." The simple answer struck harder than any accusation. Not because she forgave him, because she understood exactly how it had happened. That understanding made his mistake feel even heavier. "You know?" Lucien asked softly. Evelyn nodded. "For a long time I was angry. Her gaze drifted toward the stone walls surrounding them. Then I realized anger changes nothing. Silence settled between them. Theodore looked away, granting them a moment that belonged to no one else. Above the castle, another storm gathered over the kingdom. Vivian paced across her chamber. News traveled quickly within royal walls, faster than most people realized. A frightened servant had already delivered word that the king had entered the restricted levels beneath the castle. She knew exactly what that meant. Panic tightened around her chest. For years she had feared this day. Now it had arrived. Back underground, Lucien could barely breathe beneath the weight of what he had discovered. "Come with me," he said. Evelyn's expression softened. Not with hope, with resignation. "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "Because you belong above these walls." A faint smile appeared. Small. Heartbreaking. "That is not my decision anymore." Lucien stared at her. 3 years earlier, she would have followed him without hesitation. 3 years earlier, trust had still existed between them. Now trust was something fragile. Something that could not be demanded. It had to be earned. For the first time, he truly understood what had been lost. The silver bond glowed brighter around both wrists. Warm light filled the room. Theodore watched in stunned silence. Ancient stories spoke of bonds awakening when truth returned after long separation. Few believed such legends anymore. Yet the proof stood directly before him. Evelyn glanced down at the glowing mark, then back at Lucien. "The bond remembers," she said quietly. "Even when people fail." The words landed with devastating honesty. Lucien lowered his gaze. He deserved them. Every one. Yet before he could respond, footsteps echoed through the corridor outside. Fast. Urgent. A royal messenger appeared in the doorway, breathless from running. "Your Majesty," he said. "The Temple of the Moon has arrived early." Lucien frowned. "What?" The messenger swallowed hard. "They have brought the sacred moon oath. They insist it must be performed immediately." The grand hall had never been so quiet. Nobles filled every row. Royal advisors stood shoulder to shoulder along the marble walls. Citizens crowded the balconies above. News of the unexpected ceremony had spread through the capital faster than wildfire. At the center of the hall stood the sacred moon oath. The ancient silver pedestal shimmered beneath hundreds of candles. Symbols older than the kingdom itself glowed softly across its surface. For generations, legends claimed the oath could recognize truth when people could not. Most believed those stories belonged to the past. Tonight, nobody seemed certain anymore. Lucien stood before the assembly wearing the full weight of his crown. Beside him, Theodore remained calm but watchful. Across the hall, Vivian struggled to hide the fear in her eyes. She had arrived moments earlier, dressed in white, every inch the perfect Luna. Yet her confidence felt fragile now, like glass stretched too thin. Then the massive doors opened. A ripple moved through the crowd. Whispers spread instantly. Evelyn Ashford stepped into the hall. Silence followed her. Some people recognized her immediately. Others only knew the stories. The traitor queen, the forgotten prisoner, the woman erased from history. Yet none of those titles seemed to fit the person standing before them. She wore a simple silver gown provided by the palace staff. No jewels, no crown, no symbols of rank. Still, something about her presence commanded attention. Lucien felt the bond pulse the moment she entered. Warm, steady, certain. The high priestess of the moon temple stepped forward. Her silver robes swept across the floor. "The sacred moon oath recognizes only truth," she announced. "Not titles, not power, not reputation, only truth." Every eye fixed on the pedestal. The priestess extended her hand toward Vivian. "Approach." Vivian forced herself forward. Her movements remained graceful, though tension tightened every step. She placed her hand upon the ancient silver surface. For several seconds nothing happened. The hall waited. Silence stretched longer, then longer still. The symbols remained dark. No light appeared. No response came. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Vivian slowly withdrew her hand. Fear flickered openly across her face. The priestess remained expressionless. Then she turned toward Evelyn. "Approach." Evelyn hesitated, not because she feared the oath, because she never wanted this moment, never wanted revenge, never wanted public humiliation for anyone. She simply wanted peace. Yet some truths demanded to be seen. Taking a slow breath, she stepped forward and placed her hand upon the silver pedestal. Instantly the hall exploded with light. Moonlit silver raced across every carved symbol. Ancient runes awakened one after another. The glow filled the chamber. Gasps echoed from every direction. Several nobles rose from their seats in shock. Lucien could not look away. The bond around his wrist blazed like a living star. Across from him, the same light surrounded Evelyn's hand. The hall no longer needed explanations. The oath had spoken. Tears filled Clara's eyes. Theodore closed them briefly, as if thanking fate itself. The high priestess raised her voice. The moon recognizes Evelyn Ashford. No one moved. No one spoke. Then something unexpected happened. Lucien stepped forward. The king of the Northern Kingdom crossed the distance between them and slowly lowered himself to one knee. The crowd gasped louder than before. Kings did. Not kneel. Yet Lucien did. Not before power. Not before tradition. Before truth. His voice carried through the silent hall. I failed you. Evelyn looked down at him. Pain lingered in her heart. So did years of loneliness. Yet she also saw something she had not seen in a very long time. Sincerity. I cannot change the past, Lucien continued. But I will spend the rest of my life making certain the truth is never buried again. Tears shimmered in Evelyn's eyes. Not because the wounds disappeared. Some wounds always leave scars. But because for the first time, someone finally saw them. Above the throne, moonlight poured through the great stained glass dome. Silver beams illuminated Evelyn as though the heavens themselves had chosen her. Yet even as the hall watched in awe, a new symbol appeared beneath the glow on her wrist. Ancient, unknown, older than the kingdom. The high priestess stared at it in stunned silence. Impossible, she whispered. Every eye turned toward the mark. Because the moon had not only revealed the true Luna, it had revealed something far greater. Something that had not been seen for centuries.